Video of my dive on the oil rigs with JP, Kenny, Brian, Ben, and Andrew. We were supposed to go to the Olympic 2 wreck, but ended up at the Georgia Straits. This wreck is in pieces, and with any wreck, there's a lot of debris. Here you can see some of the fishermen's nets that get caught up in the wreck. These drift in the water and snag on whatever they run into. This particular wreck is out in the middle of a sand bed, so the nets have no choice but to congregate on this wreck. The wreck was covered in gorgonians. It also had quite a few metridium anemones that you'll see in a few minutes. The viz was horrible. It was maybe 8 to 10 feet. And what was also very strange was it was very patchy. One place it'd be fantastic viz, and then 10 feet away, there's the metridium anemone. It would be 5-foot viz. There's really not much standing on the wreck. Here's a particularly interesting cowrie that I found. Apparently there were quite a few nudibranches. I managed to capture one, but the video didn't turn out very well. All along the wreck were large anemones. This was 2 of the anemones that I saw. And they were very different. This one had slender tentacles, and this one had a much wider base with thicker tentacles. I stick my hand in to give some perspective.
Alright, coming up on the oil rigs!
This is the Eureka oil rig. It sits in 720 feet of water. The viz today was amazing. Easily 80 foot, if not more. I was diving with my group, and I'm particularly proud of the fact that we really managed to stick together quite well. If you pay attention as I'm zooming around, you'll see somebody from the group. The rigs are covered in life. This is the crossbeam at 125 feet. That's what the boat captain recommends we use as a floor. As you could see earlier, the rigs are covered in little tiny anemones and brittle stars. The pilings are also covered in scallops of all different sizes. People harvest them with cake knives. Diving the rig was picturesque and almost eerie with the visibility. Here's an example of the scallops and all the brittle stars. Every square inch of the rig's pylons are covered in life. It's spectacular, and it attracts quite a few fish. It's a bit of a labyrinth, and here's my crew. You can see Brian there in the background and Ben in the foreground. There's Kenny. I thought this was an amazing shot, seeing the diver silhouetted through these pilings. I wish I had a good still camera. There's JP, Andrew we just passed by. There's Brian. This is Brian being Brian underwater. He had me cracking up, which isn't good at 80 feet. I thought the columns made sort of a cathedral effect here. Beautiful, eerie. As you can see, JP had a cake knife. He was the only one of our group to take a scallop, which he shared amongst all of us. It was pretty tasty. The fish will feed on the scallop leftovers. The technique is to cut the scallop in place. This is the Ellen. This is a second rig. It sits in 260 feet of water and is connected to a sister rig. The visibility wasn't as good here, but it had the most life of any rig I've ever dove. The crossbeams here were at 111 feet. Again, we were told to use this as the bottom. And even at 111 feet, there is life absolutely everywhere. No matter where you go, you're inside of a school of fish. And cabezon make their home on this rig as well. You have to be careful where you're landing. The life here is absolutely incredible. It creates a refuge for fish in what would otherwise be a barren bottom. Just in case you haven't seen enough school of fish, here's Andrew sitting in the middle of one. Even lawyers can have fun underwater. We were stalked by this sheep's head. Some of the fish have learned that if they stick near the divers, they know they'll get fed because the divers shell the scallops in place. So this one particular sheep's head followed us all throughout the water column for about half of the dive. This was a nudibranch that I found. It's called a San Diego Dorid. I thought it was quite pretty with its yellow hue and blue circle spots. Not quite as pretty as the Spanish shawl. The Garibaldi were breeding on this rig, and they had prepared patches of this red algae. This particular one was right in front of me during my deco stop, and he was chasing anything away from his nest.